Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Rich Gibbens Podcast. I'm here with a very dear friend of mine, Ben Alderman. I don't have the words to describe this man. I'll let him do it for you. Ben, tell us about yourself and where you're from and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, in a lot of ways, I'm just a regular guy, But we met in the gym, so I kind of start there. I run a couple of gyms in the Sacramento area, and you walked in and you got to see kind of what we're all about. My gym's Iron Mile Fitness, and so we're just about community. We're about faith. We're about family. And that's just kind of what we've built our brand on. That's what I built this business on, is just the values I try to build my life on. So, when somebody looks at me, they sometimes see only fitness, and it's maybe a little bit, narrow of a focus, but in reality, it's a pretty good snapshot of who I am.
Yeah. Fitness doesn't necessarily mean health, right? We have fitness in our spirituality and everything. And that's one big testament to how our relationship has grown is I was seeking getting physically healthy again. And I was telling my coaches back in July and August last year, if I have, or not 2024 and 2023, if I have my spirituality in order and my physicality in order, I'm unbreakable, right? And my gym had closed down. I walked into yours, start talking with you a little bit, get you on social media. I come home at night, I see you giving this sermon. And I was like, dude, we got to talk, and that was one of the most impressionable moments in my life to date, right? Especially in recent history. Like, what stood out to me that transformed my life? And it was walking into your gym and watching what God's done with you. And one thing about your gym is there's no cussing on the music. And at first when I was there, I was like, oh, this is new. I was always listening to some really negative things while I was working out. And I'm just curious, like, what got you into the fitness world, and then what really propelled you into the faith side of everything?
Well, I mean, like most guys, we all like lifting weights. I mean, not all of us, but I mean, a good percentage of us enjoy lifting weights. I found some success in the gym, especially after college. I ended up not being quite good enough at soccer to play soccer. And, just being close, but being competitive. Because I came from a small high school, right? I grew up in a small town called Clear Lake. There's about, I think, 18,000 people there. Our school is 700 or 800 kids. So I could make the soccer team and I could make all league. But then I go to the college level and they're like, everybody looks like they're cut from a mold, and everybody's 2 inches taller and a little faster. And, you're like, oh, okay. So I'm not really gonna make it here, which was fine, and it set my life off in a different trajectory. So I went into the gym, and I love the gym. I love lifting weights. I fell in love with bodybuilding, and I bought all the magazines, the Flex magazines, the Muscle and Fitness magazines, and I tried to, find the biggest guys in the gym, ask them questions, and just get smarter and smarter and smarter. And eventually it led me down a path where I was trying to then use my new muscle, my strength, whatever it was I developed in the gym. And I didn't want to just leave it in the gym. I wanted to do something else, right? And so you want to test it. I went early in my bodybuilding career out to observe and watch the Mr. Olympia. So I bought tickets. My dad and I flew out to Las Vegas, and I walked through there, and I also realized that I was different than the people there. And what I didn't realize the difference was until I went was that every single one of those guys is on steroids. Now, if somebody wants to use steroids, that is completely up to them. I just realized that the difference was I'm not on steroids. I work really hard. I'm pushing myself. I'm trying really hard. I'm getting my protein in. I'm dialing in my nutrition, and I don't look anything like these guys, right? And there's that difference between when you go from natural to enhanced. And for me, that was not a jump that I wanted to make. And especially at that time, I'm like very young. There's no reason. TRT is not even like on the radar, right? I'm not getting blood work done in my early 20s, So I just said, you know what? I'm enjoying this. I'm going to do it for me, but I want to do something with it. And so I fell into mixed martial arts for a season, about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years of doing mixed martial arts. Love that. and then moved from that into CrossFit because I felt like CrossFit was a much better way to train for fighting than bodybuilding.
100%.
Right? But bicep curls and tricep extensions weren't cutting it for going on the mat. I knew because I was getting ragdolled by guys who were 145 pounds, right? And here I am at 205 pounds at the time, and I'm just getting destroyed. And so I'm like, my strength's not working. My age, my youth isn't really helping me out right now.
The show muscles were there, but the actually usable muscles in mixed martial arts wasn't there.
And you know what? You can kind of convince yourself when you're not doing something like that these muscles are good for something other than what they look like. But when you get into the ring or into the cage and somebody's actually trying to hit you or take you down and you're like, oh, I can do this and I'm going to be able to take this, and you can't do anything. It's a very humbling experience, you know? So I couldn't let bodybuilding go. So I switched. I went CrossFit a day, bodybuilding for a day, CrossFit a day, bodybuilding for a day. And I did that for a little while, and then I was like, that is dumb. That does not work. So I made it bodybuilding for a week, get through a whole training split, then CrossFit for a week. And what was interesting was I thought I was going to go down in weight. I actually started going up in weight. I started getting more muscular. I'm like, well, this is not what I want either, you know? So it was, my body is very, very different. I'm not a hard gainer. I don't struggle at putting on muscle. Now here I am, I walk around at 225, whether I just do cardio all day or not. And I just have a tendency to kind of retain some of my muscle. But even back then, in my early 20s, be like, oh, when you get to be 30, you'll put on muscle easy. I'm like, this is way before 30. And I'm just like I said, CrossFit 1 week and bodybuilding for a week. And then I realized that my bodybuilding was just something I was holding on to because I was thinking of the past, you know, and I just want to be capable of doing something more than what I was doing. So I just went for it, and I just went all CrossFit. And then I realized I liked training CrossFit more than I liked training MMA. So then I left MMA. So then it got me from bodybuilding to CrossFit, and that's kind of the journey of that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, knowing you and your family, I know you're back into training at Half Gracie over here with Manny and them, and you just recently
got my blue belt.
Got your blue belt, right? You got back into training, and you also have two amazing boys that are training with you too.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not sure your girls are in it just yet, right? They're doing gymnastics.
Well, there are. So let me just go through it this way. So yeah, I just got my blue belt. My son, 17-year-old's got his blue belt, and my 14-year-old. They don't do blue belts at every school at 14. So he is now at a yellow and white belt, which is kind of the equivalent of a blue belt for somebody who is that age.
Okay.
Because it goes white, gray, gray, white, yellow, yellow, white, I believe is how it goes on that progression for kids. And I think because kids need to see a few more. They need smaller metrics so they can stay patient and keep climbing, right? So that's why it's like that. And then my girls, they've been to jiu-jitsu probably 10 or 15 times, and they love it. But in part, I need them to be a little bit more well-behaved on a regular basis, you know? So I just, you know, I let them come sometimes. So they're still being exposed to it. They're not becoming, you know, tournament ready or anything like that right now. I came back to jiu-jitsu about a year ago. So I took a 13-year break, and that's a really long time. And back when I was doing it before, I was doing it in conjunction with mixed martial arts. And it was no-gi, and nobody really gave belts out back then. Now it's a little different. If you're no-gi, you can still earn a blue belt or a purple belt.
You still belt up.
Yeah, you can still belt up. And it's not really the same as a gi. You know, if you have a purple belt in no-gi, that does not mean you have a purple belt in the gi.
Right. That's a different level training.
It's a different type of training. It's a whole different world. And so I got a chance to go back to Team Alpha Male and to Uriah Faber's place, which is where I trained a lot. And in the last few months, I've got to see those guys and be trained by those guys, along with what I've done at Half Gracie. And then just recently, because of the new gym that I've just opened up across town, I'm actually over by Cassie Wernick, and he's an 8-time Masters World Champion. And so I'll be going there for the next few months, especially while I'm getting that gym up and going. So I'm getting to get exposure from a lot of different people. And it feels really good because CrossFit kept me in really good shape physically so that I could be ready for all the new things that are happening in jiu-jitsu. And it's like my new passion. It's like, it feels like this is what I was holding on to my fitness for, was to be able to do jiu-jitsu with my kids, and just be able to kind of share that with them.
Right. And you're in your 40s doing this with your kids, right? Yeah. Having a good time.
Yeah.
And what is it like watching them grow up? Because they've grown up in your gym, right? We see the pictures in our gym of Mason and Corbin, lifting at events, right? And you're on the side,
right,
watching.
Yeah.
Right. What is that like, watching them as they progress and become young men and experience that?
I mean, one of the beauties of my life is really the fact that I have a family like I have. I mean, my family is, they're pretty incredible. I mean, my boys are like, I take them anywhere and people are like, dude, how did you get boys like this? How did you get young men like this? And it's by the grace of God that he gave me two, just like hammers. They can just like pound through anything. They'll do anything. My 14-year-old just ran the CIM.
Right.
He did one training run of 7 miles, and he said, I'm going to figure this out. And he did it.
Yeah.
And he ran the CIM at 14 years old. And my son Mason, who's 17 now, did it last year at 16. And that's why my 14-year-old did it, because he doesn't want to be outdone.
Right.
So they're going back and forth. And I was really, and going back to jiu-jitsu, I felt kind of, I felt kind of dumb walking into the gym the first time with my white belt on, knowing that I had 3 years of training, but it had been a 13-year break. And, people roll with me, and black belts roll with me like, dude, you are at least, and they'd fill in the blank with something more than white,
whatever that is.
Whatever that is. And I don't want to talk about my own personal jiu-jitsu that much, but they would go with me and they would say, you do not feel like a white belt. Like, you do not. And I just look at this black belt and I'd say, I can't belt myself. I can't buy myself a blue belt. Right. And I have to wait till somebody gives it to me. But I'm really thankful that, because my boys had not done any form of grappling up until I went back this past year. And I went back because of them. So it was nice because both my oldest son and I, we started at white belt. So did my youngest son. Now he goes to like I said, yellow white, right? But then we all promote at the same time.
Right.
And so now I realize, oh, you did all this training so you could feel confident, but at the same time, you were held at white belt, so you could go on this journey with them. And that's really fun. Those
are memories that you guys are going to carry with you forever. And like you said, by the grace of God, you have two amazing kids.
Yeah.
Right? How did you, I really want to get into this one, is how did you find God, and what has he meant for you?
That's a tough question. It's a hard question because there's so much there. I tell my wife things like, I tell her I love her, and I mean it. And I've been married for 20 years now. That's, to me, amazing as well. And not to go too far into that, but 20 years ago when I married her, I also said, I love you. And a few years before that, when we started dating, I don't remember saying I love you for the first time, but at some point I did. But each time I say it now, like, it means something different than it did 23 or 24 years ago. It means so much more now. And so my walk with God has kind of been like that. Like, what God has gotten me through and how he rescued me really from myself. And what he's doing in me now, it feels even richer, it feels even more amazing. I thought I loved God before, and now I know I love him more, and so there's just this kind of continual growth that he has me on because of him. Like, and all it was is just me walking with him through life and through experiences. And so when I first encountered God, it was very interesting because I have a really strong and influential father. He's smart. He's good in business. He also, has two boys, in me and my brother, and then he has my sister as well. And he did a good job being a pretty solid father figure, you know. We could nitpick things, but that's all I'd be doing is nitpicking. You know what I mean? He was a good dad. And so we went vacations, and all this stuff. I had new shoes and I could go to practice, and he coached my soccer team and, things like that. Like, he was a good dad. And then he was into wrestling. And I wrestled one tournament in my 7th grade year, and somebody tight-waisted me and took the wind out of me. And I was like I was just like I was a late bloomer in a lot of ways. And so I just got destroyed, and I was like, Dad, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, okay. You know what I mean? So he was understanding and all that. And so like I said, I have a good dad. And at one point he came to me in high school, and he had just had like this revival with God where God was coming after him, you know what I mean? And wanted his heart. And if you don't know what that's like, running from it is very, very hard. But it's very natural because it doesn't feel like anything you've ever felt before.
Right.
Right. And so my dad's having this happen, and what he begins to do is, as he says yes to God, he begins to have these conversations with each one of his kids and with my mom. And I remember my turn. It wasn't a turn. I don't know where we fit. It wasn't like we were waiting outside of his home office.
Take it.
Yeah,
wait,
you know what I mean? And just standing there waiting. But I remember him bringing me to his home office, right, which was more normal for a business owner at that time to have, filing cabinets and a big desk, like a big, huge desk was like really cool, and he had that. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't like, I don't walk into his office like I'm afraid. It's just my dad's office,
Right.
I've run past this desk many times. And he just begins to share with me Romans Road, which is just walking you through some very basic scriptures of how to become a Christian. And he did hold my hand through that, but then he would always ask me, what does that mean to you? And I said, I'd give like an interpretation of what I thought this ancient text said. I mean, one of the Bible verses is really simple. It says, for the wages of sin is death. And a lot of people think the Bible's really, really hard to understand. I mean, there are areas of it that are complex, and they're tied in with a bunch of other things. But that to me didn't seem complicated, even as a high schooler. I wasn't thinking, oh, well, this is crazy. I'm like, that just means that your payment for the sin that you commit is death. He's like, that's right. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, oh, I got it right.
That's an A+.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. And so we went through a series of these, and then eventually at the end, he said, do you want to receive Christ? And I remember saying, yeah, I do. And so we prayed, and then my life, it was incrementally changing, because I still had the pulls of high school and the world.
You're a young man.
And I was young,
Yeah.
But God was faithful, man. Like, he was really faithful. I wasn't the same, as I was. My friend group started to change, and that was painful. But doing that in high school and having a dad that was the one who shared the gospel with me made it so it wasn't like this private thing that I did, maybe like a church camp with some other friends,
right?
And then come home and I could just kind of be my normal self, And I remember one time being really upset that I didn't get invited to a party. And my dad said, he might not even remember this. I doubt he remembers this. He said to me, because I was really broken up about it, and he said, hey, it's okay if you want to go to places like that, but what you need to do is stop naming the name of Christ if you're going to just want that all the time, And it was like I was being a hypocrite, and he was calling me out for it,
I didn't see where you get it.
Yeah, you see where I get it. Yeah, you see where I get it. I mean, I can be a little bit hard on people at times, and I think that black and whiteness, my dad put that in me.
That's awesome. I want to get back into that.
Yeah.
The message I sent from the Instagram the other day in our Band of Brothers group was talking about the frequency of God and listening to it, and it all stems from love. And Rick stopped me after we left this morning and was like, oh, I didn't get a chance to see it. Right? I don't have Instagram. So I pulled it up and I showed him it. And he's like, that's funny. I remember this moment. I was walking my son, and we were getting ready to cross the street. I got my dog on the leash on one side, and my son's on the other side, and this car is coming fast. And I yelled at him, hey, stop, right? And his son was like, hey, Dad, you yelled at me. And he's like, yeah, I did. I love you, right? That car was coming, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll hear God, we're whatever it is. Like, I love our conversations so much because you tell me the raw truth, and for me, that means you care so much that you give it to me real, And I know other people might not take it that way, but that's something I super appreciate.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather be honest with me so I know exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not mincing words. You're not doing this whole circular thing where it's like eventually get to the point. It's like, hey, brother, here's what I see. Right? Where have you been? If you're not in the accountability group, you're not showing up. What's going on? Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have two things happening there, right? With Rick and his daughter, this, which must have been a long time ago because, Rick's kids are grown now. Or
he's got grandkids now.
Yeah, he's got grandkids now. But that's why it's so great when these guys who've been around longer than us can give us some hindsight, and I love it. But two things are happening. One, Rick is talking about the discipline that comes from a loving father. And the Bible even talks about that in Hebrews, that who he loves, he also disciplines. Right? So if God loves you, he's going to discipline you as well, right? It's not just a rewards-based system that's only you get something when you're good. So we reward good behavior and we ignore bad.
Right.
Right? Just positive reinforcement. Sometimes there's just reality and it's like, hey, you need some correction on this and I'm going to correct you, or I'm going to give you let you feel the ramifications of your bad decisions, and then you can get smarter that way. Right? There's a lot there. And
which way do you want it?
Yeah. And I mean, and the other side of it is, in terms of just saying what I'm thinking, that's not easy for me, but I've started to remember it's something that we all have heard, but clarity is kindness, and for me to be the most kind version of myself, I need to tell you what I'm thinking. Now, I don't want to say it in a way that purposely pushes you away, but I also don't want to say it in a way where you're not sure what I'm actually saying.
Boom. For me, that works, right? Even if it's something I don't want to hear, which I'm imagining there might be a time down the road where there's something I don't want to hear that you say. Everything you've told me, I've known to be true. Everything. And I respect the truth more than a lie to make me feel good, feel happy about myself. Or if my own friend can see me messing up and they don't say it, is that a friend?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not what friends do, right? Friends hold each other accountable, and there's a there's a friend that sticks closer and is more valuable, it says, than a brother. You know what I mean? Because that friend can be there when maybe a brother is away. But that's just like, that friendship is actually very important. Fellowship is important. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And so when I try to bring things where I speak maybe really definitively, it will either be something where I can see in Scripture that's clearly outlined for us, and one of my friends is stepping out of it, and I'll say something. But I also want to make sure that person is, quite frankly, I want to make sure that person is a Christian. I'm not trying to tell a non-Christian some new standard that they need to live if they don't love God, right? Like, it's not worth it to go into something like that because they haven't made the first step, which the first step is just saying yes to the Lord and saying, hey, God, I want you to be the Lord of my life. Okay, you've done that. You've seen that you can't do it on your own. You sin and you are a sinner and you want God. Okay, then we can have conversations about right living after that. But before that, I'm not trying to get you to right living. It's just so you look like a Christian, right? Like, I don't want that. I don't want somebody who's, I don't know, any one of the other world religions, or just a secular humanist that just believes, I don't need you to live according to the Bible, right? I would rather just tell you and be a witness of who Christ is to me, who he's revealed himself to be in Scripture, and how I think he's moving in the world now. And then once you've gone and gone like, yeah, actually I see that now, then we'll have conversations about the sanctification process. That's kind of the setting apartness of our life for God. And so since you've made some of those same claims, I go, oh, Rich, hey, you're newer at this. Let me just tell you what you might not have thought about yet, because it says it right here in Scripture.
Greatly appreciated,
right?
From my end, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So you find God as a teenage man. Your father walks you through and introduces you to Christ and everything. Was it all perfect since then?
Yeah, it actually has been so easy. No, you know what? I did. So I was kind of a square, kid growing up. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't do a lot of really bad things. Like, take your scale of bad. You know what I mean? Or the things that your parents would be really freaked out if they found out about, right? And my parents probably would be very happy to hear the list of things or the frequency of things that I could have done and how much I actually engaged in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And they wouldn't have a heart attack, where I know from different people in my circle that if their parents found out some of the things they were doing, their parents would have a heart attack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My parents would have been very happy. Listen, I'm not trying to say I was some sort of perfect kid, but I didn't quite go down that road of really testing boundaries as a young man. I became a Christian early on, like in high school. But what I was talking about, that sanctification process where I'll be more confrontational with somebody when I see something, a lot of people didn't do that for me. And if they did do it for me, what I was doing was I was camouflaging it, and I was living double life in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? And living one way over here, or hiding sin over here, and always convincing myself that I was like almost going to move past it, and it was like I've got it under control. And so as I moved through that, I get to the point where I almost destroyed everything that was valuable to me. I remember I called my parents. I called my dad when things were really bad at home, and my wife is a saint, and she is patient, and she is also ruthless, you know what I mean? And for many reasons, and most of them I gave to her, you know what I mean? And I called my dad, and he goes, well, son, I'll tell you this much. If you don't fight, somebody else is going to raise your kids. And I thought, well, that ain't happening. I'm going to fight.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah. That's a tearjerker.
Yeah, that was rough. And so that's part of the reason why I'm so thankful for my kids. I'm so thankful for God and for the way he worked. And what that allowed me to do was, a lot of people, they have this really rough background that they come from. And they're so thankful for what God did in their life. And it's just an amazing testimony. It's a beautiful picture. But God really, it's hard to say God kept me humble, because then you sound like you're bragging. But God found a way to really show me how awful I could be, because I did a lot of my biggest missteps while the banner of Christ and Christianity flew over my life so proudly. And I was over here meddling in things that were not for me. And God's like, you think that you were pretty good. You can't even keep it together when you have me. You know what I mean? And I was just like, man, I am one, maybe two decisions away from being the worst version of myself. And it's like, so for that reason, I still continue, and I struggle, but I try to give God as much of my life as possible. And, early in my CrossFit world, in my CrossFit space and athleticism, I really thought I was going to be the guy who would podium at the CrossFit Games, literally one of the top 3 in the world. And people would go, oh, how'd you do it? And I'd say, God did it. I thought that was what God wanted from me, and I would be that guy. And people go, man, being a Christian is actually cool. I want to be like that. Then I realized that's not what God has for me, and I pressed into that so hard to the point where even a little bit of idolatry, really, where I'm making a little God out of something that was never supposed to have that place in my life. And it's interesting now, because I still have a gym, right? And now I just opened up another gym, and I have a gym for kids, right? Where I'm trying to teach them about fitness, and it could become an idol to them too. And then we have it at 3 or 4 other locations where we're running group home kids and after school programs, and kids through it. And I'm showing them fitness, but it's actually a much more powerful tool for me now, because it doesn't have the same grip on my life as it used to, and God has let me see that if I let fitness possess me, it's not a good thing. And it's not just because I become so fit. It's actually because I become very ugly, and a lot of other things creep in along with that. So yeah, I probably left out a bunch of stuff, but
we got the gist.
Yeah,
I'm sure
you got the
there's
gist.
there's a lot in there, and you don't have to give every detail on that, right?
Yeah.
People can read between the lines and experience what they want to from that. And I like how you say, how awesome would it be to be in the top 3 in the world and do all that? And that's more of a self-driving thing,
Right.
Right.
Well, and God didn't really need that, right? So if you look at the time that I was really into it, 2012 through, gosh, probably 2018, 19, God didn't need a guy standing on top of the podium who was a Christian named Ben Alderman. He had somebody standing at the top of the podium who was a Christian named Rich Froning, right? And so God's going to get what he wants done.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he's going to use people that he wants to use. And he's going to bless those who he wants to bless in that way. Because I'll tell you this much, I'm just as blessed as Rich is.
Right.
And I'm thankful to know Rich and to see how he lives his life and to know that, you know, what I know about him. But he's a blessed individual and he's so fit. But that's not what God had for me. But that's what I wanted for me. Right? I wanted that for me. I wanted to be, you know, that. And it's like, oh. And then I started thinking, I'm like, what if there's two Christians on top of the podium? Then people would see it and go, well, definitely I should become a Christian. You know what I mean? Because Ben and Rich. And it's like, I don't need to be even mentioned in the same sentence as Rich when it comes to fitness, right? The guy's the fittest man in history.
Right.
Arguably, you know what I mean? And which is awesome. And so God just wanted to use me a different way. And I see that now because now I actually care way less about being known for my fitness, you know? And I don't want to become that guy anymore that's just like cool. It's hard anymore now. I'm 42, right? It's just so cool that people are like, oh, because you're a Christian, I'm going to become a Christian. Like I'm not that anymore. Now I enjoy being in the church and teaching and preaching and sharing the word of God so that the people who are hearing it are being affected to change their environments, right? And that's what I'm really trying to do more now.
I can say from personal experience, like this version is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Praise God.
Yeah, praise God for sure. Because I would have found it, but would it have been right? You know, maybe I had tried a couple churches before going into your gym and to get faith and fitness and the community there. You know, I talk about sitting at the right table, and I wasn't at the right table. And I walked in the gym, and like I said, I got home, I saw on Instagram you were giving the word, and I was like, I'm probably at the right table right now. We're going to figure this out,
right?
You know, and I'm curious, you know, we have our Band of Brothers group, you know, in our faith where we meet weekly on our own outside of the church, and we check in regularly. Hey, we read our Bible and we prayed. If you want to journal, you journal too, or meditate, whatever your practice is.
Yeah.
What do you do to hold yourself accountable as far as in your relationship with your kids and your wife, knowing you have these 3 gyms, you're stepping up into our pastor role for the next 3 months, right? How do you hold that down per se?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question. That's a real question. I mean, it's actually be very, very difficult, you know, because I just still get things wrong, you know, all the time. I tend to really get things wrong often. I try to create systems and opportunities and habits where I'm home all the time, or I get my kids what they need. And a lot of times I feel like I'm giving them the leftovers still, you know, and I don't like that. At the same time, I think I'm also modeling good hard work for them, you know, so they can see that. And I'd never have to fake it with my kids. Whenever I get to see them, if I give them I'm genuinely happy to see my kids. You know what I mean? I don't, like some parents will just like, oh, my kids, just if I could just get away from them for a little while, they're just always around. I'm like, or when they're around, I'm not like that. Like I'm okay. Like I am definitely okay being around my kids and hanging out with my kids. And I just recently went on vacation with my wife. We went to Italy for our 20 year, which was super fun. And people were like, oh, was it so nice vacationing without your kids? I'm like, it was. And don't get me wrong, I love vacationing without my kids in the right ratio. Like 1 out of every 7 vacations, I like to be just me and my wife, you know?
But the other 6.
The other 6, I like having them around. Someone's like, hey, would you go back to Italy tomorrow? I'm all sure if I could book 6 tickets. I don't want to go back just me and my wife. I want to bring them. I want to show them the new experiences. I want to walk and have them look at the Coliseum and go, wow, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Or it looked like this, or, you know, I want to see that reaction. So for me, I enjoy raising 4 kids into adult and sharing experiences with them, and also the love of Christ with them. I love doing that. And then at home, I get caught up in the routine. I get caught up in the mundane. I get caught up in the rat race. I get caught up in the do. And it was just yesterday. Honestly, I don't have these kind of conversations with my wife as often as I should. But I told her, I said, I've got so much going on. I said, I'm going to be very selective over what I say yes to moving forward. I'm tired of not having time to do things that I think matter. You know what I mean? And so that was a big part of a realization for me. And so I still don't get it right. One thing I try to do is Pastor Dan told me this, put the big rocks in first. And what are those big rocks, you know? And for me, it's my family, right? It's time with the Lord. For me, it's some sort of expression of fitness is important to me. Like movement is ingrained in me. Mm-hmm. And so I have a big desire and a big need where I'm almost unhappy if I don't get a workout in, you know? So I've got to go to jiu-jitsu, or I've got to hit the gym, or I've got to do something.
A hike, a run, push-ups.
Yeah,
something.
I got to do something, you know? Yeah. And I could tell you stories where I'd be at a family reunion. I go to the restroom and close the door, and I'll do 100 push-ups because I just got to move. You know what I mean? I'm at you know what I mean? And you're like, well, where are you going to move at? You know, it's like, and then stand there way too long because I already broke a sweat and I have to stop sweating before I come out of the bathroom because that's awkward.
Right.
You know what I mean?
What's going on?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you eat something, you know, it's like, no, actually I didn't even use the restroom. Then you flush the toilet, the whole thing, you know what I mean? Like I just get to the point where I have to move. So there's that side of me, you know, that's still very much a part of who I am, but it's now no longer for the experience of being the best, right? It's just because that's part of who I am. It's part of who God made me, you know? And so I enjoy movement, and I love spending time with the Lord, and I even sometimes would like to schedule less things just so I have more time to read. Yeah. You know? Not read books, but read the book. You know what I mean?
The good book.
Yeah.
You know, I've spent a lot of time these last years reading different books. A lot of amazing books. A lot have helped me with business and personal stuff and, you know, script practice, like how do you communicate with different people, all these great things, right? Yep. Learning my trade. And since being in our Band of Brothers group since just about last year, somewhere around there, the one book I want to pick up every night. Every night. You know, I just finished 1 Corinthians, ran through 2 Corinthians. I'm reading Galatians now. I'm like, oh, somebody said a script from this. I want to read it. Yeah. Right. And you just mentioned Hebrews. I want to go back and go back and read it after I get done with Galatians. Like, I tried doing the Bible through. Right. And what used to happen when I read Genesis, go over to Revelations, done. Right. Like those are my. I love the beginning and the end. Yeah. Like, what's all this fluff in the middle? Right. It's not fluff. Yeah, no, it's not fluff. It's not fluff. But now since we're now being part of Band of Brothers and going in this, I'm just like, where is God calling me to read? And I'll start reading somewhere, and He'll tell me, no, not right here. Like change it, and I'll change it. Oh, this is what I was supposed to read right now. Right. I'm just going with what feels right. Yeah. You know. Just get through. I've never read the whole Bible. Right. You know, now I am. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I keep turning away from Psalms because it seems really long. Yeah. Right? It's long. Like, there's some great stuff in there. But I'm sure. Yeah. I'm curious. You know, what's your favorite book in the Bible? I don't think there's a close one. I mean, my favorite book in the Bible is actually Ezra. Okay. And there's a few reasons for that. You know. I think that you know, he was, so Ezra, it's kind of an obscure book, and like a lot of people haven't read it before, but Ezra is a very interesting guy, and this happens at a very interesting time. It's during the exile of the Israelites, and they're in Babylonian captivity, and this is kind of nerdy, right? But they're in Babylonian captivity, so they've been removed from Israel, and they're in Persia, okay? Which is not where you want to be. Okay, like you've been removed from your homeland. And what happens in that situation is other people move into your homeland and they make it their home. Right. And then you have a bunch of people and they're over here in Babylon, in Persia.
And after this exile, or during this exile, God actually moves on Cyrus, King Cyrus, and says that he's going to have the children of Israel go back to their promised land and let them go back with his blessing, money and building material, and go back. And that's very strange to me, because you have a non-Christian, that'd be the best, but it's a non-God, non-Bible believing king. His heart is moved by God to allow his people to go back. You know, who in their right mind would ever think that that was going to happen? You know, and to me, that's just, it's crazy. And then there's the whole move of them back in there. And this is just like the first 7 chapters of Ezra, which is only 11 chapters long. And Ezra is actually given this whole backstory. He's like me. He over communicates. He says backstory and brings in like 17 different things, doesn't leave out a single detail, you know, where a lot of people are like, just give me the meat and potatoes. You know what I mean? I want to know, you know, give me the Sunday school version of this, where it's like this big picture, what's the main point? Right? And Ezra's like, oh, I've got 7 chapters of backstory for you. You know what I mean? So not only that, I feel like I got to know a little bit of Ezra's personality. And I go, wow, there's somebody out there who's kind of like me, who just doesn't know when to shut up, right? Doesn't know when enough's enough, but just keeps talking and really trying to build this picture, because somebody, however, what is it, 2,800 years later, like me, is going to read Ezra and go, wow, God made people like me before, and he made this book so I could relate to it. And then he goes in chapter 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and talks about the intermarrying of the people of God with the people there, and why they shouldn't, and why they need to repent of that. And I just thought he was the man for the day, and he spoke to the current cultural issues, rather than just these kind of untethered, unnecessary, you know, kind of just random Bible sayings. Like he was like, no, this is what the people are going through, so this is what I'm going to speak to. And so I love that, you know what I mean, about Ezra. I love Job, even though Job is very complicated and very difficult at times too, because he goes up and down. But to me, it shows a really personal relationship with God, where he's actually willing to go, oh, I feel like this, and then I feel like this. And he's not shying away from how he actually feels before God. He's not trying to look all buttoned up. He's not trying to come across as like, you know, like, oh, there's a certain way I need to come across to God. It's like, nope, this is just me. And this whole emotional roller coaster I'm on, God, you're going with me. You know what I mean? And so he connects with the Lord in that way. And there's many other books. 2 Timothy is amazing. I think it's the last letter that Paul wrote. And so when you think about Paul and how great of a man he was, like, I would like to know his dying words. You know what I mean? And so you get to know his words as he comes to the end of his ministry. And it's like, that's important. You know what I mean? Like, he's learned as much as he can. He's had enough time to spend with the Lord as he's had, and all the experiences. And where's he at? You know, and he's kind of alone, but there's a lot to it. So there's a lot of books like that. And now I'm going to be in Acts for 2025 while Dan's gone. Yeah. And I'm going to try to tackle the first 8 chapters of the book of Acts and look at the early church. And in 12 weeks, I'm going to try that over 12 weeks. And so I've been really enjoying Acts. So there's 4 books right there. You say, what are your favorites? And I'm like,
there they are. I love Job. I haven't read Ezra yet. But Job stands out to me. Yeah. You know, I just like I like the test, you know, the test. And God says, well, there's nothing you can do to him, you know, to Satan. He tells Satan, there's nothing you can do to this man, right? He won't lose his faith. And he takes everything. Yeah. Everything. Yeah. Yeah. They made a movie about that. I want to watch that. But yeah, Job is a good one for me. But I'll have to check out Ezra. I haven't read it yet. Yeah. You know, like I said, I haven't read the whole Bible yet.
Yeah, and then if you read Nehemiah, it's pretty cool because it comes from the one's from the scribe, who's like the more like a thing of a pastor, right? Is Ezra. And then Nehemiah, I believe, is the governor. So it comes from the political side, and it highlights the same thing. So like when you read the Gospels, how they overlap and how they're just different perspectives on the same time period. Okay. Ezra and Nehemiah are sort of like that too. So you can read it, and it's not a timeline continuum. It's actually a side-by-side account. Right. So you can read the 2 different accounts and kind of get a better picture. So Nehemiah's pretty cool too.
Thanks for sharing. Now I know how to read the book.
There you go. Yep. There you go.
So you have your 2 boys. Yeah. And you have 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. You adopted them.
Yes.
How did that go? What was calling your heart? What happened? And
Yeah. Oh man, I love my girls.
they're awesome.
They are amazing. And
Full of personality.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife and I had spent some time talking about what God had put on her heart. And she had really expressed to me that she thought adoption was in the cards for her. And to me, that didn't pluck a heartstring. That didn't move me. That didn't tickle me. That didn't get me at all. Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't like, yeah, we're going to adopt. I don't even think I was like, oh, okay, sure, cool for you. I don't think I was even like that. I think I was just kind of like literally whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that is not on my radar. You know, and then she wasn't at church for some reason. And my wife and I, we are pretty regular churchgoers, right? It takes something for us to miss a Sunday, right? We like to be there. We make that a priority. Sunday morning fellowship and being a part of the body is like a priority to us. But she wasn't there. And there was a woman speaking about a mom who had a child that she's gonna have to give up for adoption. And I thought, wow. I was like, maybe that's the kid we're supposed to get. So I think I either text her or I call her. I can't remember what I did. It's like, I think there's a kid that we might be able to like. She's like, wait, what? You don't even, she's like, now you're into it? Like, I wasn't even there this Sunday and you're hearing this story and
all
whatever.
Of a sudden.
Yeah. And so I don't remember how it happened, but we ended up filing with a foster family agency, Koinonia, right here in Sacramento. And a faith-based organization, and they went through the various background checks for, there's a lot of questions you have to answer if you want to become a foster parent,
right?
And especially the foster parent with the intent to adopt. Like that is a very, it's a process, And so we're going through the backgrounds, we're going through the interviews. I think drug tests, fingerprinting, all that stuff, and we are 95% of the way through this process or 90% of the way through this process, however that works, a majority of the way through the process. And we get a phone call from them and they got a phone call from somebody who's looking to place 2 little girls into a Christian home. Now, that's a big deal because this woman, she's not a foster family agency. But she had developed over the years, over the decades of taking in kids in an emergency shelter home situation where kids are born and then there's no safe place for them to go. So the state has got to put them with somebody. So they have 2 weeks usually in respite care or in emergency shelter homes where people will open up their homes and take in, it'd be just like if I got in a car accident driving and I was killed and my 4 kids were in the car, or me and my wife were killed, and nobody had cell phones, and people like, well, who are these kids? You know what I mean? Where do they go?
Right.
Like on night 1, where do they go?
Right.
If they don't get a hold of my parents, right, or you, or Pastor Dan, or somebody, they've got to go somewhere, right? And so sometimes that happens with kids when they're born under various circumstances. And so my girls were staying with this woman. And she called the foster family agency we were working for and said, working with, and said, do you have a Christian couple that we would consider these 2 girls? And so she was circumventing the process, and they have to play by the process rule. So they called us and said, you guys need to interact with her. And then we became respite care for those girls. And then Koinonia helped us with the adoption by continuing the process as we were respite care for the girls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then they helped us with the process. And we went through that, and a total God thing, a total God thing. And so we have 2 kids that we made and 2 that God gave us, and our family is perfect.
And how old were they?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months.
Right, they're what, 10 now?
They're 10. Yeah, they're almost 11. February will be 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and since then I've kind of been more open with people about my thoughts towards adoption, And I tell people, if they're Christians, I'm like, I think you should adopt, unless God tells you not to.
Right.
And they're like, I'm not going to adopt unless God tells me to. And I'm like, okay, your prerogative.
Right.
But I mean, the way we care about orphans and widows, and the way God has a heart for the children and for the lost, and then people say things like, I don't think I could love an adopted child like my own, or things like that, and I'm like, well, at first it is a little different, because I think my wife didn't carry them in her body and share DNA with them for a while. But over time, the chosen bonds of being a mom and a dad to two is a different type of bond, but it's probably equally as strong.
You know, just a little bit ago, you reminded us all here that sometimes your friends are closer than your brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And we're thinking about what God's calling you to do. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, hey, maybe I wouldn't be able to love this kid. Yeah, the love's just different.
Yep.
The love's just different, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I do see several of my friends that are Christians. They don't go to our church. They have their children and they're trying to adopt, or they have foster kids and stuff.
God bless them.
And they're. I have a friend that's in real estate with me, very close colleague of mine, and they were looking to adopt these girls from Mexico and they're heartbroken because they can't. The mom basically stole them back out of the orphanage they're in, and they're heartbroken. They may never see them again, and all that stuff. They're still going to go. They go down there every year for a missionary. They just went and just got back. They did get to see them, but now their heartstrings are pulled on. They feel devastated. But there's another calling there, right? And I don't think they've closed off the mission to adopt. Well, they have 4 kids too. They just want to help more.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I started the Overcome Project is for that. But there's, I think, and this, I mean, you can quote me on this because it'll make you look at the stats. There's roughly 60,000 foster kids in California. Mm-hmm. There's roughly 60,000 churches in California. So if each church had one person who adopted one kid, there'd be no need for the foster care system.
Wow.
Right? And so for me, I think about that. Now, if I'm off by 10,000 one way or the other, look at the good that can be done regardless.
Right.
Right? Look how the church can play a role in helping meet the needs of orphans, right? Of widows. And that's what the Bible says. That's why I use the term orphans, is because orphans and widows, those who don't have a family anymore, right? And who becomes their family? The state. Right? And these days, you either love the government or you don't. It's like, do we really want the government having to raise our kids, or would you much rather be the church, instilling the church's values and God's values into these kids? And so I'm about getting out there and doing work with kids and helping kids and adopting kids. But, I could only adopt 2. I might be able to adopt a 3rd, and it's always in the conversation, but I can't adopt 60,000. Right. So my fitness has kind of changed. I'm using my fitness now to kind of reach into the foster system, connect with kids, and then offer them some sort of physical health, mental health that is correlated highly with fitness, and then bring in the spiritual health, right? So that's what we do with the Overcome Project on a regular basis. We have 5 locations where we're doing that. We're using fitness to reach them for not just their physical health, but their emotional and definitely mostly their spiritual health as well.
Forget making a podium. How do we change the world?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Right. And I was getting to this part, right? Where it was like, hey, this is old Ben. This is what Ben thought he needed to do.
Yeah.
And God put another Christian up there.
Yeah.
Right? He's got another calling for you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's important to pay attention to what that calling is, because we have our own what we think God wants for us, right? I love the saying, right? We make a plan and God laughs. Your plan was to get on that podium.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. Yeah.
Right? Now look at us.
Yeah.
Now look at you.
My legs are too short, actually, is what's really wrong with it.
Man, I got the same problem.
Yeah. He knew, though.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's incredible, man. I got to say, just from a friend and from a brother in Christ, man, I'm super impressed with what you've been able to do, what God's been able to do in your world. And, like you say, iron sharpens iron, right? Like, we got a dull blade on this side, you know, and I love it when you're honest and truthful. And I really hope people understand, you know, I haven't said this on my podcast, but I come from foster youth background. You know, when my parents split up and I was in and out of juvenile hall a bunch, my dad told, I'm in juvenile hall. I go to court. My dad gets out of jail and he comes to court, and I'm hoping, hey, I get to get out. I get to go back, be with my siblings, because that's who I really cared about. I didn't give a crap about my dad or my grandparents. Like my grandpa I loved, but there's just too much going on, right? And my dad tells the judge, we're not taking him back. He's yours, right? And I'm 14, 15, right? Just devastated. 15. Devastated because it was more worried about my siblings, right? And then I get put in a foster youth. I was in a group home, and luckily I had a great probation officer that said, hey, man, I don't think this is a you problem. I think this is your family. We're not going to send you to level 14. I have an interview with our Charlie Fam home director, John Pollock, and I need you to calm down before you go see him, right? Because I was punching concrete walls. They didn't put me back with the other kids. They put me in my own cell. I'm screaming. I'm punching the concrete wall. My freaking hands are all torn up. My probation officer, hey, buddy, come here. You know? Yeah. And luckily from that, you know, I had family friends of my grandparents for a long time that after I graduated high school, I had a month before going into the Army, where in foster youth, they kick you out at 18. If you're 18, you're out unless you're on track to graduate, so I got blessed with that extra month because I graduated June 6th or 7th, and I turned 18 May 11th.
Right.
And so they let me stay. But the day I graduated, I didn't get to go out party. I packed up and went to my aunt and uncle's house. They were close friends and family, aunt and uncle. Now they're mom and dad, right?
Yep.
And luckily, they were in my life as an adult to, you know, I had somewhere to come home to when I was coming back from the Army. I had, you know, when I'm coming back from Iraq, I got a place, right? When I'm coming back from Afghanistan, I got a place. And then, but yeah, I think, you know, what you've been able to do with our community here is it's not overlooked from my end, you know? And I know there's plenty more guys out there and gals like you throughout the United States, throughout the world, that are looking to make their community better. And I think Christ is a big driving force in a lot of those people.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's like this idea, you know, what's better than having a low view of yourself? Well, what's better than that is having a high view of yourself. But what's even better than that is having an accurate view of yourself, you know? And for me, I remember I'm kind of just a hose, you know, a garden hose that's been sitting out in the sun and it's got some dirt on it and whatnot. But like my job is, there's nothing special about a hose except for the fact that it delivers water. You know what I mean? And so my job is just to deliver water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, people can walk by and go, that's a nice hose, right? But they really just want what's inside, what's coming out. You know what I mean? And so I'm hoping that I can get out of the way enough to just let God run through me. And if he wants to use me in the way he wants to use me, then great. But I don't ever think he's going to make me into some like shiny golden hose. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm just me. And I just want to bring Jesus to as many people as I can, especially when I'm in my most clear state where it's less of me and more of him. You know, it makes it really simple just to go, hey, God, just do with me and do with my business, do with my nonprofit, do with my ministry, do with my friendship, do with my marriage, do with my kids, whatever you want. You know, you want to give me a lot? Great. Give me a lot. You want to give me a little? I'll take it too. Because I only want what you have for me.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. We're going to stop right there, dude. Yeah. I love you so much. I can't wait to have you on again.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Dude.